Hey everybody, this is scarftough, and for today's dispatch from the studio, I want to show you a couple of changes that I'm making to my rig to fix a couple of problems that I've run into. But before I get into that, I want to give a shout out to Tim Webb at discord.com. Tim's blog, Discord, is an amazing resource for anybody who's interested in doing music with iDevices of any sort. It really is kind of required reading for iOS musicians. It really should be in the license agreements for the apps. Anyway, he gave me some great advice on how to improve my videos, so he is at least very much partially responsible for the improved content that you're going to see today. But to get into what I'm going to talk about with you today, I wanted to draw an analogy for you here. Imagine you go to your car and you start it up and you go, it definitely should not sound like that. And you have no idea what the problem is or why, how you would go about fixing it, even if you were to identify the problem. I've kind of got that with some of my recording. I've been a musician, but I've never been a recording engineer, so I'm kind of learning this as I go. And I can listen to my mixes and I go, definitely should not sound like that. No idea why, and I don't know what I would do about it if I did know why. But the way I'm looking at it is I'm going to be recording these demos and I'm going to be making a lot of mistakes on the demos, trying to figure out what I'm doing wrong while I'm making the demos so that when I go to record this stuff proper, I actually have a few more tricks up my sleeve. Today I want to show you one of those problems I've identified and how I'm going to work around it. In my last video I showed you how I was using my iPad and my Alesis I/O dock to record my music in the iPad using an app in the iPad to record. That's all well and good and everything. The problem is that my lowly iPad 2 really doesn't have a lot of memory in it when it comes to being able to record all of the stuff that I'm doing while I'm running the applications that's making the sound, and then maybe an effects that is influencing the sound in some way. You start putting all of those together and my iPad kind of freaks out a little bit. An iPad Air may well be able to handle all of this stuff without any trouble whatsoever. In the meantime though, I'm running into some serious roadblocks just because I'm asking the iPad to do more than I think it's even remotely capable of doing. So to fix that, I have this. This is the iConnect MIDI 2 Plus, apparently, by iConnectivity. And what this does is it allows me to take the sound that's coming out of my iPad and put it into my MacBook Pro and record the audio from the iPad into the MacBook Pro. Now the thing that makes this tick is that it's got two USB ports in the front, one that you can connect the iPad to or an iPhone, any iOS device, and then another one that sends a USB signal back to the computer. On the other side, I've got MIDI in, MIDI out for MIDI 1, and then MIDI in and MIDI out for MIDI 2. So I can connect two MIDI devices to send signals to both the iPad and the MacBook. And then through the USB, the MacBook can send MIDI signals to my iPad app. And then my iPad app, through some special technology that iConnectivity has developed, can send the audio directly into my iPad, or into my MacBook Pro. Now some people think, well, I mean, you could send the audio there before, right? So what's the big deal? Here's what makes this different. Before, when I was going to send audio from my iPad into my MacBook Pro, we were making the sound digitally inside the iPad. So then the I/O dock would then take that sound and use a converter, a digital to analog audio converter, to change that from a digital sound to an analog sound so it could send it out through these MIDI outs or through the headphone output. Then it would get to the MacBook, where the MacBook would do the opposite. It would take this audio signal and then it would change it, this analog signal, into a digital signal using a digital or analog to digital converter, the opposite of what the I/O dock did. That's a lot of stuff that's happening to the sound between here and there. What this device does is it takes those converters out of the chain. So this will send the digital signal directly from my iPad into my recording software. In this case, I'm using Reaper, and I'll talk a little bit more about why I do that in just a moment. So what I want to do is show you how I get the sounds from the iPad into the MacBook, and how I can use the MacBook to control the sounds in the iPad. Let me show you. So here we are looking at the rig as it's all set up. As you can see, I have the iPad hooked up to the iConnect MIDI through the special USB cable. And then the iConnect MIDI connects to the USB connection on the MacBook Pro. Now, to control both the iPad and the MacBook Pro, I have my beloved Axiom 61 M Audio product hook up through a standard a standard MIDI cable into the iConnect MIDI. And as you can see on the screen of my synthesizer here, so my iPad is running very good soft synth, addictive synth. When I play the keys on the Axiom, you can see that it lights up there on addictive synth, and then you can see here, zooming in on our actual signal, we've got my lovely voice there, and the audio that was coming out of the iPad. Now, where things get really interesting is that I can use the MIDI capabilities inside my digital audio workstation. In this case, I'm using Reaper. The reason I use Reaper is because it's pretty darn good and it's really cheap. There are a lot of really good digital audio workstations out there with all kinds of different price ranges. But this one works really well for me, and for the budget-conscious musician, it's really, really tough to beat Reaper. And what Reaper can do is allow you to control virtual instruments using MIDI. So what I've done is, before I started taping here, I recorded just a really quick piece of MIDI data that I'm then going to paste in here, which will then be controlling the iPad from the MacBook Pro. So this track is set up to send this MIDI data to the iPad. Exact same thing, except it's going from here down over to here instead of coming from my keyboard. So that is how I will use the ridiculous quantity of apps that I have on my iPad to generate the sounds that I need for these tracks. I will send the USB digital audio out of my iPad through the iConnect MIDI 2 into my MacBook Pro. That way I can get the sounds that I need without overtaxing my iPad's CPU. Stay tuned for more dispatches in the studio. In the meantime, please feel free to comment below. I'd love to hear from you, and of course you can subscribe down there too to make sure that you stay up to speed with all of my videos. In the meantime, also make sure and check out scarftough.com for music reviews, app reviews, and my music as it gets released. Until next time, this is scarftough signing off.